Hello and welcome to another episode of a weekly Waypoint. Today we are playing Persona 3 Reload. And you know what? We're going to be talking about it a fair bit as well. Those of you who have been subscribed to this channel for a while will probably have picked up on the fact by now, but I am a big fan of RPGs and JRPGs. And I did, in fact, try Persona 3 Portable when it first came to Game Pass along with the rest of the Persona games, well, 3, 4, and 5. There's even a video up on this channel of, I think I called it Adventures in Port Island, which I think when I do a video of Persona 3 Reload, I'm just going to call it Blind Ventures Persona 3 Reload. It doesn't, not everything needs to be an adventures in location when it doesn't necessarily make like obvious, like, you know, readable sense. People who read Adventures in Port Island probably aren't going to think, oh, that's clearly Persona 3. But anyway, to cut a long story short, yeah, I've been excited for the release of this game for a while, ever since they announced it, because I always intended to go back to Persona 3 Portable, but as soon as they announced this, I was like, oh, I'll just wait for this obviously superior version. That being said, some people do not think this is a superior version, but that's a conversation for another day. If you're completely unfamiliar, most people think this version is amazing. It's got like 9 out of 10s across the board, and I completely agree. I am absolutely obsessed with this game in a way I was not with Persona 3 Portable. This game pretty much has two sides to it. First of all, it has what you're looking at now, which is the kind of like monster fighting combat side of things, the Tower of Tartarus, which you slowly climb throughout the events of a game, which randomizes every time you go into it. And the combat system is honestly really fun. I don't really get to show off like the best of it here because I'm a little bit overpowered, as Mitsuru is about to tell you, but it's all about utilizing elemental weaknesses to stagger opponents and then kind of like combo stagger opponents and then do big damage when you've got them all staggered, which is like really satisfying and fun. And as the main character, you kind of collect these different personas, almost like Pokemon, but not really, because you don't exactly forge a bond with them. You kind of fuse personas as well, so you will very happily mash them into each other and use them to create more powerful, more unique personas, which sounds quite like a complicated system, and honestly I think even in this version of the game they don't do a very good job of introducing you to that system. They throw you like an optional wall of text to go and read to learn about it, but honestly the more you do it, the more you will understand it. But yeah, Tartarus does get a little bit repetitive, I must admit, but they've definitely improved upon it from what I've played of Persona 3 Portable, because with this one there's more dialogue as you run around. There's those little loot arms that you know, hit and collect things from, and you know, just small little quirks like that which make things more interesting. And then the other side of this game, which you're not seeing today, is the life sim side of a game, where you are basically a high school student in Japan and you're making friends with people, and you know, every day you go to school and you learn, and sometimes there's like questions, like actual school questions that I'm like, shit, I don't know half of this stuff, I'm stupid. And you know, you have a certain amount of time each day, like if you choose to do an activity, time passes basically, and you know, and you can choose to like enhance your friendship with someone who wants to go out and grab a meal or whatever, or you can go and like do one of many various different activities to like increase like your stats for like charisma. And well, it's not called charisma, it's called charm, but yeah, I'm not explaining this very well, but it's really fucking good and addictive. There are two things which make me nostalgic about the main story of this game. The first thing is that it is set in 2009, and it reminds me of my time at school when I would have been at a similar age as the main cast here. And obviously I'm British, I went to a British school, there are some very obvious differences, but no, like it really nails that feeling of like the first day at school, of like getting to know people, of like, you know, when there's like a day off, like it really nails that sleepy vibe of like, oh, you know, what are we gonna do on our day off? You know, we can just kind of chill. You know, there are various people who want to go hang out. Makoto is definitely more of a sociable bean than I ever was, and what's funny is that actually some of my social anxieties do get triggered in this game when multiple people want me to go and do things with them at the same time. I'm like, oh god, I'm gonna have to disappoint one of you, I'm so sorry. There are romance options in the game, but I've yet to really get that far, if you are wondering. And I should say as well that forging social links, which is what they're called, also affect like so different personas come from different arcanas, and the more you level these different social links which are attributed to these different arcanas, the more XP they get when you fuse them. It's a whole thing, it all ties into each other quite neatly. Anyway, the other thing that makes me nostalgic about this game is it kind of gives me early Bleach vibes, for anyone who knows that anime or manga. The first 15 or so episodes of Bleach were very slice of life about Ichigo's high school life and his alter ego life, kind of like dealing with hollows, not shadows. Shadows are in this game, hollows are in that game. And while, you know, the vibes are different in Persona, I would say Bleach is more metal, Persona's more pop. But it really takes me back to watching Bleach for the first time and discovering anime as well. Like, it's so good. All I want to really push at the end of all of this is it is so fucking good. And no, I've not played Persona 4, and no, I've not played more than the first hour and a half of Persona 5, but my god, am I probably going to want to after playing this. Although I think they just took Persona 4 off of Game Pass, which is quite frustrating. You're gonna make me pay for my dang games? But yeah, anyway, I'm already paying for the monthly, I know. Anyway, that's my first impressions of Persona 3 Reload, and if you've got Game Pass and you like RPGs, I really, really recommend giving it a try. Oh, and the soundtrack's fucking amazing too. Don't let people on social media convince you otherwise. They're just too attached to the original version, which really isn't all that different to this version. I get it. I played Pokemon Let's Go Eevee Edition. I played Pokemon Brilliant Diamond. I went, oh, I prefer the original soundtracks, even though I can understand that these new arrangements are probably really good. Speaking of RPGs and JRPGs, this week I finished Final Fantasy II, and you can watch my final journey in the form of a handy dandy YouTube video, which would be the previous one from this one. Isn't that nice? My final thoughts on Final Fantasy II are not going to be that different to many other people's, but I think that game, inside the very problematically designed class or lack of class system and the skill upgrade system, there is still a really fun and unique Final Fantasy adventure to be had. It's the first one which really tried to approach a story, and while the overall plotline really isn't very original or unique, it does have interesting characters, shocking moments, and I think it's well worth a play if you're playing through all of them. Just don't go for Final Fantasy II first, because it's not really the best representation of a Final Fantasy game. But also, I am now playing Final Fantasy III. I have dipped my toe into it. I was going to wait until after I had my fill of Persona 3 Reload, but I'm just too curious about the differences between the games. My first impressions are that I was a little disappointed that we've gone back to kind of like template characters, because obviously in Final Fantasy II, while you could name them anything, Furion, Maria, Guy and Leon were all well-defined characters with lots of unique dialogue. And now we've gone back to 4 nameless protagonists who, you know, you're supposed to kind of like impose yourself upon in terms of like characteristics and stuff, and that's just not as interesting to me. I was also really put off by the fact that all of the class selection is pretty much the same as it is in Final Fantasy 1, down to the sprites being the same. But I looked it up, and apparently you can get more unique and different and new to the series jobs later, so I'm a little bit more interested and back into it, but this is still very early days. I'm like 2 hours into the game. But yeah, so far I am missing Final Fantasy II's uniqueness. Like, I'm like, oh, this is just Final Fantasy 1 again. You know, like obviously there's some improvements and some differences, but so far Final Fantasy III has yet to really make a lasting impression on me. Also this week, because I wasn't already playing enough RPGs, I've returned to Dragon Quest VII Fragments of a Forgotten Past, which I've been playing through on my Nintendo 3DS family of systems. I'm not going to say too much about this, just that I left off at Frobisher and I have come back and completed Frobisher. I started this playthrough in 2022, so as you can see it is proceeding very slowly, about as slowly as my Wheel of Time read through at this rate. Nah, but I just had a craving for something Dragon Quest, and when nothing Dragon Quest was announced at the PlayStation State of Play, which, by the way, I really have nothing to say about because I don't own a PS5 and I didn't watch it, sorry. Death Stranding 2 on the beach is a really stupid subtitle, that's about it, that's about the only take I have. When nothing Dragon Quest was announced at the State of Play, I just took matters into my own hands and was like, well, I still haven't played most of these games, so I'm going to continue playing 7. And I basically, it's not like I'm actively playing it, it's not like I'm trying to make sure I make time for it every day, it's more like when I come home from work, I will just play it for like an hour or two before bed. I am like 15 hours into the game and I'm yet to even discover the job system, which I looked up. I was like, there's a job system in this game, right? And there is. So I think At some point that game's really going to open up in terms of like game design, and I'm probably going to be pulled into it a little bit more actively than I currently am. But enough about video games. You may remember, I don't know if I talked about it on the channel before, but I was very opposed to Netflix cracking down on family sharing to being household based instead of just account based, like you could have 3 people at a time or whatever. And at the time, since I was watching Star Trek through that service, I decided not to reward them by starting up a new account and paying them myself, instead of watching through my sister's account. Instead, I decided to continue my watch through on Paramount Plus, which is, you know, the service probably looked at their numbers and went, holy shit, someone just subscribed to us, what the fuck? If you're wondering, by the way, I'm still kind of on break from Star Trek Next Generations, but I do look forward to getting back to it. I was really enjoying it. Anyway, I finally decided to check out Netflix's ads model. They're basically, in the UK, you can pay £5 a month instead of £11 a month for the same service, just every now and again you get an ad. And I was like, let's see how bad this is. And, you know, I was very much personally opposed to the idea of having to pay for a service which would still feed you ads. I still am. I still don't love it. But it is hard to argue with paying over half off, and I only get like 30 seconds every half an hour, sometimes less than that. And, you know, if you tab out, it pauses the ads, they're savvy, but you can literally just like look at your phone and ignore it for 30 seconds. It's not that big of a deal, so I have decided to kind of like, you know, wise up a little bit, you know, put a bit of a break on my morals tirade and just kind of try it out for myself. And again, I still don't agree with having to pay for something that serves you ads, but I do see from a pragmatic point of view the ads making up the revenue for the part that you're not paying, and it just being a cheaper way of accessing that program. I do not trust them to keep things the way that they are currently, though. I can easily foresee a future where they slowly start drip feeding more and more and more ads into the service and make the gap in payments between that and the normal service more, and, you know, making it harder to upgrade and get rid of the ads. I think that will probably happen in the future, but for now, 2024, 5th of February, sorry, I read my date the wrong way around. It's not that bad. Anyway, I brought this up to say that it's been a while since I've had Netflix, obviously, and I looked at it and I was like, oh shit, I want to watch this series and this series and this series and this series and this series. And then I looked at all of them and I was like, oh, that's all non-fiction. I'm a non-fiction guy now. I mean, obviously you don't call shows non-fiction, but if they were books, they would be non-fiction. It's weird how we have different terms for different mediums like that. Medias? I don't know. But I'm currently watching a docudrama, because I like those, called Alexander the Making of a God, I think it's called. It's about Alexander the Great and his life. Basically, I think it's probably made by the same people who did the Romans series, where they went through 3 different Roman emperors, except this one is a longer series, and I'm 2 episodes in, and I'm really enjoying it so far. Docudramas, if you don't know, are basically like half documentary, half drama. Like, it's literally that, and it's a really fun way to explore history, as long as it's all accurate, but you would assume it probably is, because they're literally talking to historians who are like, yeah, we don't actually know who ended up assassinating the king, and then they show you the drama bit, and so you know to go into it with that bias of, okay, we don't technically know who did this, and they're clearly kind of pushing this, but at least they've given me the tools to be able to look at this objectively and be like, oh, this is a scene that could have unfolded, and even then they're being vague about it. So yeah, I love that shit. And I'm also excited to get back to a bunch of series which I haven't been keeping up to date with due to not having Netflix. By the way, the reason this all kicked off is because I finally started the shows/series portion of my backlog template, and I was going through the different streaming services and taking note of stuff that I had, you know, it said, oh, continue watching this, etc, etc, etc. And so yes, I was foolish enough to go to Netflix and be like, oh damn, I can't access this anymore. This is not an ad for Netflix. Fuck Netflix. They have been making very dumb business decisions lately. Anyway, one more purchase I made this week, which is a little bit more sizable, is Encyclopaedia Eorzea Volume 1, which, if you don't know what that is a kind of a world book, kind of a world encyclopedia book for the world of the game Final Fantasy XIV. They recently released Volume 3 and I started to get a little bit paranoid about Volume 1 going out of print one day. I own similar books for other game worlds like World of Warcraft, Diablo, The Elder Scrolls. You know, they're not always like encyclopedias, sometimes they're like history books, that kind of thing. And I thought it is absurd that Final Fantasy XIV has become one of the games and one of the fantasy worlds at the very top of my kind of like enjoyment, my appreciation index, and I do not have a single physical thing from those games. And I thought, what better place to start than this encyclopedia? And oh my god, it is gorgeous. It's like £15 more than those books tend to be, which is one of the reasons I'd held off for this long. I just assumed it was because of like translation costs, and maybe partially it is, but honestly, looking at this book, it's bigger than the others. The text is a lot smaller, so there's a lot more in it, and just as a product, as a book, it is fucking beautiful, and I'm so excited about it. I've started it, but obviously there is a lot to it. I haven't got that far through it yet, and this, you know, Volume 1 was made around the time Heavensward was the latest expansion, so I was worried initially it was going to feel outdated, but it doesn't. It actually has some lore in there about where we're going in Dawn Trail, the new expansion coming out this year, which goes to show just how much of this world they created ahead of time, which is pretty cool. But yeah, there's a couple of things, like they talk about Offard and Hingashi isn't mentioned at all, so Hingashi was clearly like invented as they were designing the Stormblood expansion, you know. There's a couple of things where you're like, oh, that's missing, or oh, that's a little different, but honestly, it's still, the stuff they do tell you is still all relevant, and I'm really enjoying it. Also, finally, one very quick final point, just to catch up on last week's video, I did give Palworld another try on my friend's birthday, Reese's birthday. I was like, hey, we should play some Palworld together, why not? I know you like that game. And yeah, it's kind of fun. I definitely still hit that wall, though, of like, I'm really interested in a survival crafting game for about 3 hours, and then I kind of go, yeah, it is all just kind of the same thing, isn't it? But you know, I caught a human, I put him to work. That's kind of messed up, but that's what you can do in Palworld. I might start a single player file still, I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I will see you in whatever I make next, hopefully.